There you go. Well, a album that is not avant funk would be
Mm-mm.
our third album of the night, and our second album we're going to be covering from this band. We're going to be covering the self-titled album from Blur tonight, and in the opener you heard song two, and then I think I picked "Death of a Party," and that's what you're going to hear right now. So a reminder, as always, that sometimes we do these right ahead of time. So you just did hear "Death of a Party," but you're hearing me also remember that I told Josh to put that in before he does the cut. So Matt, what are our numbers?
Woohoo! We have Blur's Blur coming in at number 99 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 14 in 1997, number 586 of all time. It is Blur's third highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1999's 13 and 1994's Parklife, which we did cover in a previous episode. Blur did not make Rolling Stone's list, and the band Blur is ranked number 91 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Okay, so I think I'm going to pick us up from when we left off in the last bio, which is I did the bio of Blur up to the album Parklife, which was released in 1994. This was 1997, so I would encourage you to go back when we did Blur. I should say when we did the bio for Blur. We did it up to Parklife. So now, at when we last left us, let's do a where we were at when this happened before. In 1994 in Parklife, Blur had gone from a band that was struggling in the early 90s. They tour America and find it to be very unsatisfying, especially Damon Albarn, and they decide to sort of recraft themselves with what they describe as sort of the classic English storytelling songwriting that we think of with like the Kinks and the Jam and the Fall and all of these XTC, or all these quintessentially English bands, but sort of a modern context of that music. And they just happen to hit at around the same time that Suede is revisiting that, but in a different way. And those two bands begin to break and become the first of what becomes the nascent Britpop movement. Later, of course, Pulp and Oasis, Supergrass. There's others that come, but I think Pulp and Oasis are slightly bigger ones in England. While this is going on, and Blur becomes arguably, if not the biggest of those Britpop bands. It's their one, and Oasis is sort of 1A. At the beginning, it's definitely Blur, and we're going to talk about something that happened, but for a while it was Blur, but then sort of the English public turns on them a little bit and gravitates to other bands, Oasis being one. And Blur always has this really fascinating relationship with America too, that they mention often how, especially Damon Albarn, like how much he doesn't like America. But you'll see going into this album the effect that America has on it, and they keep trying to break into America at different times. I don't know if you guys saw this, guys, it came out, but a couple years ago, Blur decided to add in a date at Coachella. Did you ever see this before? It's a little bit uncomfortable.
So.
No.
So it's one of these things where, a lot of British people brought it up because obviously to British folks, right? Blur's a big deal. The big band, right? And when you talk to British folks, they're always a little bit surprised. It's kind of like, as much as people remember Blur here, I think there's people that don't even realize that song two, which they recognize, is Blur. But outside of that, it's like, I don't really know that band. Are they like an indie band or something? So it's a weird disconnect of huge band that could play big venues in England, and then here sort of incognito anonymous, I'd say, would be how I'd describe at least Damon Albarn in the context within Blur. But they went to Coachella and they were put on the main stage and they had a very sparse crowd that was not super into it, right? And Damon Albarn's kind of yelling at them for not getting into it as much, as saying like, this is the last time we're coming to America. And it was interesting. It kind of did illustrate, like, visually a little bit, that disconnect between here's this big band and for whatever reason they just don't hit in America. And the reason I bring that up is, and you'll see when I go into it, but between this album we're covering tonight, the self-titled and Parklife, Blur blows up. They're all over the BBC radio. Boys and Girls actually gets to 59 on the Billboard Hot 100, so that one did have a little bit of resonance there. But they're, to give you an idea, they're like number one on the British charts, and the album Parklife stays on the album charts for 90 weeks. NME calls them a great pop record, bigger, bolder, narkier. I'm not 1,000% sure what narkier means, but
Yeah.
maybe if you're someone from our cousins over there in the United Kingdom, you can tell me what that means. And funnier than Modern Life is Rubbish. Parklife.
They narc more than other people. They like,
Yes.
like, that's the only thing I could come up with.
Fair enough. And Parklife is regarded as one of Britpop's defining records. It wins all the awards at the Brit Awards, like not all, but most of the big ones, including Best Band and Best Album. And one of the members of the group said at that point that that was the point where like Blur went from like little band that could, Graham Coxon said this, the guitarist, like little band that could kind of, to like big freaking deal, which, like most rock bands, they have a little bit of a struggle with that. So shortly after that, they begin working on their fourth album, which we actually have not covered, called The Great Escape. And that one's released the start of 1995. It's considered to be the third album of three of a trilogy that is mostly songs that are third-person narratives about British life. And Parklife is the middle one, and then Modern Life is Rubbish, which we also didn't cover but talked about, was the first one. So they kind of decided to go bigger and bolder with that, more theatrical, more orchestral, and I think what was a big deal in the United Kingdom was the fact that their lead single, Country House, was a big part of the rivalry with Oasis, which was called the Battle of Britpop, which was one of these things that was a huge deal in the English tabloids and was like loosely something that we were aware of over here on this side of the Atlantic, right? Like in general passing. And the bands did not like each other. Oasis sort of positioned themselves as the working man's group, and Blur sort of was considered to be like the college kids, right? Or the upper class group, which is funny because as we mentioned in the Parklife episode, Blur was not. They kind of were all of the working class background that Oasis was positioned as, but they released singles on the same day, Oasis and Blur, and actually Blur wins it in England. They sold 274,000 copies of Country House to the 216,000 of Roll With It that Oasis sold, and it became Blur's first number one single. But interestingly enough, that seems to be where the band sort of hit their critical and popular peak a little bit. There started to become a little bit of a backlash against them shortly after that, even though it went to the charts and hit number one and sold nearly 500,000 copies in its first month. They start to become losers in the court of public opinion. The media and the music press sort of turns on them a little bit and moves over more to like the Oasis side of thing, like the new shiny toy. That they kind of a constant narrative was that they won the battle but lost the war. They were like a middle class like college rock band, and one of the members of the group, Alex James, said after being the people's hero, Damon was the people's prick for a short period. Basically, he was presented as a loser very publicly. So that was kind of where they were at going into this album. Also, the band was very much fighting each other at this point. They were not getting along. To give you an idea of some of what was going along, Coxon, who I mentioned earlier, he started to get very angry with other members of the band. He was upset that Damon Albarn was taking most of the creative control for the vision of the band. He was not appreciating that because he was a songwriting partner. Alex James, another member of the band, had like a very high profile, like sort of like playboy hedonistic lifestyle, which kind of rubbed Coxon the wrong way, and he himself was struggling with drinking problems. He is the first member of the group to kind of like really hate the idea of being Britpop. He just doesn't like it. He doesn't like being put in that scene and doesn't think it's totally authentic for him. So in one of those funny ironies, famously, right, Damon Albarn comes up with the version of Blur's identity that is sort of like, I don't want to be one of these American grunge bands, right? That sounds like Nirvana, and we're kind of anti, American grunge band, American influence. When we did the Parklife album, that was a lot of it. Interestingly enough, it all comes full circle because at this point, Coxon starts listening to like a lot of American alternative rock bands, most notably Pavement, who he's listening to quite a bit, but also Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. That's kind of who he's leaning into. Modest Mouse is another one that came up, I heard, during this time. And at first everybody's like, what's this guy doing and stuff like that. But Damon Albarn becomes a convert at this point, and he particularly likes the lo-fi and underground rock that he's listening to. And he sort of says, I think I want to do kind of what we do, but with some of the elements of particularly American like indie rock, which is interesting because a lot of like how Blur defined themselves was not doing American things. But Albarn said, I could sit at my piano all day and write brilliant observational pop songs all day, but you've got to move on. And so that actually becomes a big piece of his identity for the next decade. The album in 1999 that we mentioned before, I think it's called 13, is a different thing. And then of course he does Gorillaz, right? So he lived as he spoke. And this one comes out in February 1997. They think it immediately, people were like, what are they doing? Are they kind of trying to destroy their critical spot, right? I'd kind of say when I was reading about it, guys, it was similar to kind of the reviews that Pearl Jam got when they did Vitology. Like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? This isn't 10 in verses, right? This is something completely different. But critics liked it, but were like, ooh, I don't know how this is going to sell, specifically with like they said the teenage girl fan base or the mainstream base. And they said this just seemed to be inspired more by Pavement and Beck, which it was, and that it was commercial suicide. But Beetlebum, the lead single, did debut at #1 in the UK. And even though it didn't sell as well as its previous albums, it did still sell very well in Great Britain, very well. But most notably, it was actually more successful internationally than any other Blur album. So I wouldn't say that it broke the US, but it got good reviews in the US music press, and it did get certified gold. It was also very popular in other European countries, South America, and Asia. And they did get their first single that cracks in the US, and one of their most successful singles in the UK and other areas, Song 2. And interestingly enough, I don't know how much you guys know about what Song 2 is designed to be, but it is very much a jokey song where it was like, all right, let's do like a grunge or a post-grunge song, just to like kind of like as a laugh, right? And it's such a throwaway that we'll just call it Song 2. And it also is making fun of all the record companies they've had, because they're like, you need to have a hit. So they're like, we'll do a song that might be a hit, but we'll call it Song 2. And basically they're just fucking around, and they sang it. It was slow at first. And then Coxon was like, well, why don't we just do it really fast and sing it loud? And he said, I tried to play as amateurishly as I could on the guitar. And then of course, that was the one that like blew up, right? And like around all the time. So they're like, that's
Sounds
how it works.
right.
So yep. So it is kind of funny that way. They did continue to soldier on until around about 2003, when finally the tensions in the band just were a little bit too much, and a couple members of the band broke, and finally Coxon did leave the band in 2003. The band soldiers on for a variety of reunion performances. Basically, every time there's major British events or big events, it seems like Blur comes together. They've come together for like a concert at London's Hyde Park. They came together at Glastonbury one time. Different festivals, right? They'll come back and play together. So they're on good terms now, and they did do a studio album in 2015 called The Magic Whip. So, and it was well regarded. So Damon Albarn continues to make music in a variety of projects. He made an album by himself as recently as 2022. And one of the members of the group became a professional cheesemaker. So wow. There's that too. Yep. Wow. So there's a little bit of an overview of Blur. Matt, let's start with you. Self-titled Blur 1997.
Self-titled Blur. Yeah, I like this one, guys. This was... it's kind of like they're wearing their influences on their sleeves. I mean, you said the Kinks right off the bat, and that's
Yep.
like the first, band. There's several songs on here that sound like a Kinks song, a country sad ballad, man, Beetle Bum. Look Inside America. It's like they're almost like trying in certain parts of these songs to mimic like the Kinks song, the sound of the Kinks. You've also got something like there's some psychedelic like Bowie on
Yep.
here, like I'm just a killer for your love, sounds of or a strange news from another star is a very Bowie-esque, like early Bowie, I would say, kind of like Space Oddity type Bowie sound here. And then yeah, you've got more of like straight ahead rock, like song two, and I think like yeah, theme from retro. They're kind of all over the place on this record, and it's interesting how they get compared to Oasis, because Oasis did one thing and stayed in that lane, right? Oasis did, we're going to do big balls in your face rock pop music, and Blur is doing all kinds of stuff. It's a little bit more avant-garde, but there's still hooks in here. There's still catchy things. They go full blown like almost hardcore in a song like Chinese Bombs, right? I mean, that kind of stands out. So I could see an American, buying this album off of this, what song two is, and being like, I love that Blur song, that song two, and then they buy this album and they're like, what the hell is this? It's like, I could see them totally, I'm sure there are a number of Americans out there who were pissed off that they dropped 17 bucks on this record, thinking they got hoodwinked by song two, because there's really not another. It makes sense that that's the song that took off in America, and it's a funny story that they kind of used that as like it was a little bit of a laugh, and that's the one that really where they finally hit in America with that song. So and it's also like just over 2 minutes, right? It's in and out. It's like the shortest song on here. I mean, second shortest song on here behind Chinese Bombs, but yeah, just like the variety on here, the quirkiness. It's a very British album, and definitely, like I said, is reminiscent of the Kinks. And let's see, like I think, what was the song that I really liked? Maybe You're So Great. I like this kind of like an acoustic song, lo-fi acoustic song that was really an easy song to listen to. And I think I probably listened to this record 3 or 4 times, and this to me it got better every time I listened to it. So this is also, I think, would benefit from multiple listens. Not that I didn't like it at first, but I saw more into it. I was picking up on more things, because it's an album I think that does benefit from that, as opposed to like you hear an Oasis album, you don't need to hear it twice, you get it right away, right? This is an album where they're throwing enough stuff at you, keeping you on your toes, and throwing enough production styles and whatnot that that there's a lot of variety here, and it makes it for a more interesting record. So while I growing up, as far as all of the Brit pop bands, certainly Oasis, I am that classic American that really loved Oasis and didn't really pay much mind or attention to these other bands. But the more of these albums we're covering, from like Blur and Suede and Pulp,
Yeah.
you're really seeing it's like, yeah, Oasis really doesn't fit in, because I could see similarities between the other 3 groups, and because they are more varied and it's more interesting. Oasis maybe is more traditional and more catchy, but they really don't. They're not fitting in as well, other than being like big British, rock stars, right? Like that they wear similar sunglasses, maybe, like that's about it. But sonically, it's quite different. So I do find that interesting. But for this record, I do like this a lot. I liked Parklife. I feel like Blur's a band that I should be listening to more. I think we're covering 13 as well, towards the end of the season. So we'll get another record in there. So that'll be nice to hear. But yeah, I really like this one. This was definitely, it grew on me more and more. It gets better with each listen. So thumbs up for me.
Yeah, similar sentiments to Matt on my review. I was that person who knew song 2 and that's about it from Blur. Remember that another like iconic video, and just kind of like the craziness of that, and then never like went to look into the rest of their catalog. I unlike Matt, I didn't pursue Oasis either. I just kind of separate pop on the back burner, I guess. But I really enjoyed visiting this album this week after Parklife, which I really liked, that Blur continues to rise in my estimation. I really the comparison to the Kinks is apt for me. I love the Kinks after, we went through all their albums, and I'm liking Blur kind of the same way. They're in that same vein. Like Matt said, I like the Britishness of them, and Damon Albarn and the band's kind of ability to morph into different things and have different sounds, and the songwriting craft is there, but also kind of like the pastoralness of British life, or kind of the working class ethos that comes through, but also kind of just the variety of ways they're writing pop songs that have like incredibly catchy hooks. This was the album I was like most excited to re-listen to after I went through the initial listens on everything, and so it continues to kind of unveil itself to me the more I listen to it. There's not a lot of weak songs on here. There's like a little bit of everything to enjoy, or something on every song that I really like, and it starts off great with Beetle Bum in song 2 and sets the stage. I think I said this with Parklife, but is there any band that's more indebted to Blur than the Arctic Monkeys? Because I feel like they just kind of like ripped them off almost like entirely in some respects. Or they're
but then Blur also owes a debt to the Jam
Exactly.
and the Kinks, so it's kind of all
it's
fair
just
play.
the lineage of it, really, like you're saying. But I see the clearest connections between those two bands, and I'm excited. Damon Albarn, for his, I don't know, his bristly or whatever he is with the media and the public. I'm excited to discover the next Blur album, and as they continue to I think they're becoming like my favorite of the Britpop bands, kind of easily, in fact. So this is a big thumbs up for me this week.
Well, I like all of those so-called
Yes.
Britpop bands
Yeah.
in different ways. So
I do
in
too,
fairness, of different levels. So I hear what you're saying, though. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that they're my favorite, but I appreciate what they do, because one thing, and I think Pulp is this way a little bit too. Suede, I remember really liking that album because they did a variation of a theme, but they did a variation of a theme, in this case like glam rock with some of the traditional British indie rock really well. And Oasis kind of does that big bombastic, like, Beatles meets traditional pop rock, power pop type music, but they stay in that lane. What I appreciate about Blur is just how many, and Parklife was the same way, how many different versions of Blur are on the same album. So whether it be sort of a Britpop song like Beetle Bum, and then song 2 is, whether it was intentional or it is kind of amazing to me that they thought they were going to give it to their record company, and their record company was like, oh, this is going to suck. You know what I mean? And instead the record company's like, finally, you fucking wrote a song we can put on the radio. So, and it is so like kind of undeniable. You're like, I can't believe they didn't hear it. You know what I mean? It's kind of, it's instantaneously catchy, right?
I mean, right from the drums and then the guitar lick right at the beginning. It's like undeniable.
It's like it's funny because it's, I look at it similar to like when the White Stripes were at Seven Nation Army, right? It's become what it's become. But I think that the White Stripes kind of like always realized that Seven Nation Army had maybe not like it's going to be a stadium anthem potential, but realized kind of what it was a little quicker. And when it happened, we're not really surprised. Like, okay, it's cool that it blew up like that. But yeah, I could see how that would be the song people did. So I kind of put those two in the same lane, right? Where there's this band with all the stuff I like, and then they have this one song that crossed over to everybody, right? But yeah, then they're doing, they're doing all kinds of stuff. Like Chinese Bombs, like is more of like in a punk lane, and Look Inside America is sort of like a ballad, like introspective ballad. Death of a Party has some electronic elements. You're So Great could be like a Galaxy 500 song in terms of like what that sounded like.
Oh yeah,
yep. In fact, it even sounds, I'm completely blanking, but it sounds like one of the songs on the album that we covered that we loved, that I really loved quite a bit. It had quite a bit in common with it, and there's songs that sound quite a bit like I actually think in some ways, we keep saying the Kinks. I actually think Blur, and we only covered, I think, 2 albums from the Jam. I remember us covering Sound Effects and All Mod Cons, right? And I don't think we were as high on the Jam as we were on Blur. And I think some of that is I think Blur took what we liked about the Jam albums and then took it into like a 90s sound that appealed a little bit more to us production wise. But a lot of what they're doing here, I see real connections to like what the Jam was doing too, like being in a variety of different musical styles, trying to write really big hooks. And then I feel like every decade we cover a couple of these very British acts, right, along the way, whether it be the ones that sound like this, like, The Fall and the Jam and the Kinks, but XTC and Madness, right? Like all of these bands are like quintessentially British. And Blur kind of, and Britpop, I guess, is where we've been to some degree in that lane in the 90s, because we're having a lot more like British bands that kind of don't seem as British, your Bushes and a variety of different bands, right, that they're British, but it's like, oh, I barely even recognize them as being British. But you never worry about that with Blur, both thematically or because Damon Albarn's got that British voice that's like, like that goes into almost like inaudible, like it sometimes that
he
you
leans
never
into it for sure. Yeah.
Yes, and that's where I think it's a little bit like Arctic Monkeys, Josh, in that like same thing, right? Alex Turner like leans into that quite a bit. It's like, you're not going to forget that I'm British, right? Like we're going to make sure it's there, which is cool. I no knock on that at all. But I think my takeaway from this is just, I love the variety on it. Not everything totally works for me. And I will say this was a grower. The first listen, I was like, oh, I don't like this nearly as much as Parklife. And, Parklife pretty much immediately, I was like, oh, I know what they're going for here. And I really like this. What a surprise. This one, I wouldn't say quite got to that level for me, but the more I listened to it, the more it grew on me and the more I came to appreciate it. So thumbs up for me.
Great. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the British bands, like discovering those bands that through every decade. I feel like there's always a couple that I really respond to.